It's Lou Collins, it's the 5th of March, it's just past 11 o'clock. Well, what a week, what a weekend. I don't know if you remember last week, and the last few weeks, we've been discussing a serious case of Hollie Greig. Myself, James, who isn't here today, he's off to the hospital with his mum, so hi James, Jenny, I hope you're well and good luck today. Myself, James, Brian Garish and the rest of the UK column went up to London to support Anne and Hollie, and we've also got an interview which I'm going to play very shortly with Robert Green's daughter. Robert Green was arrested in 2010 for handing out leaflets, or on his way to hand out some leaflets up in Aberdeen, and his trial was a couple of weeks ago. He was put in prison for 1 year for attempting to hand out some leaflets, and that was apparently disrupting the peace, and then for breaking bail conditions. Previous shows you'll have heard all about it. So we went to the court. There was 2 carloads, great support, lots of people waiting outside. We all ferried into the court just before 12 o'clock for about 4 minutes, where we were told to have a break for lunch. Belinda McKenzie, who's the main campaigner towards Hollie and holliedemandsjustice.org website, she's going to be on the phone giving us really a proper update, because it went all over my head, some of what they were talking about in there. Anne and Hollie, I must say, did seem in great spirits, and, you know, even though it wasn't the result everyone was hoping for, they still came out with smiles on their face, and I know how much they appreciated the amount of people that turned up there to support them, as did Robert Green's daughter, Catherine. So I've got that interview to play now while I get Belinda McKenzie from Hollie Demands Justice onto the phone. And just at the end of the show, Bill Maloney was down there, who has also been a previous guest on the show, Pie and Mash Films. He's also running for London Mayor. He's going to be on just before the end, just to say what the feeling was down on the street, because him and Lily were down there filming, speaking to everybody. Bill organised everyone to be crossing on the zebra crossing outside the court with their banners, stopping people. There was also some mainstream media up there, which apparently were there for Ryan Giggs. I know Bill went over and had a word with them and asked why they won't. And there was a bit of a confrontation. Later on, I strolled over there. And first of all, I played it a bit of a different way, saying, oh, that's great. It's really good to see there's mainstream media here in support for this case. You know, it hasn't been mentioned, and good on you. And then they looked rather, embarrassed and said that they weren't there for the case. And I said, why? You're human beings. Does this not strike a chord with you? And is this not something that should be reported on? Who are you here to film? And they said Ryan Giggs, the footballer. So it beggars belief, as far as I'm concerned, that the mainstream will turn up in hordes to film and interview a footballer. But there's a little girl who's had some shocking things happen to her. A court case Friday to determine whether it goes back into the hands of the family courts, the closed family courts. And there wasn't a bit of remorse on them. The Sky News reporter, I must say, did say she would go and have a look. And I pointed her in the direction of the What If video, which I can now say that myself and James made. James has to take all the credit for it. He had about 5 hours sleep in 3 days, working to get the Hollie What If video right. I just went and did the audio. So a really huge thanks and so much appreciation for all the work that James does. He also it was his birthday Friday, and he sort of gave up his birthday to come up and take pictures, do a bit of filming, did the interview that I'm going to play literally right now, while I get Belinda on the phone. And to James, couldn't do all this without you. He makes the videos. Him and David from Black Swan make the videos that go up on YouTube for me. So without them, I don't know where I'd be. So I'm going to play this interview now with Catherine. Just a little bit of an update on her dad, and I know he wanted to say thanks. So I'm going to get this lined up now, and I'll get Belinda on the screen. She's been up here today supporting Anne and Hollie in the case that we're going to talk a bit later about. How's he doing, Catherine?
My dad's doing fine at the moment. He seems to be holding up. His spirits are high. He seems to be getting on well in the prison despite his circumstances. Nobody in the prison can really understand why he's there. So they seem to be quite friendly towards him. So we're pleased about that. And he seems to be working in the prison library.
Fantastic.
And he's helping some of the prisoners they're struggling to learn, struggling to read and write, to read and write with their reading and writing ability. So, yeah.
And has he got all the letters? Is it, they all flying in daily?
He's had so many letters, and he always tells me, he speaks to me every day on the phone, and he always tells me to thank everybody for their support.
That's great.
It's really helping him in there. And he always tells me, please say thank you to everybody whenever you get the opportunity to say thank you to everybody for all their help and support.
Oh, that's great, Catherine. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you.
That's just a brief thank you to everyone. As he says, he's working in the library. He's he's overwhelmed with the amount of support that's out there for him. I'm going to bring Belinda in right now. Morning, Belinda.
Morning. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to perhaps flesh out a bit more what I said rather briefly outside the court on Friday.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Because really this is, a lot more needs to be said about this. It's really quite complex, and it is a very scary situation for Hollie, actually, and I really would like the public to know that they do need to keep speaking out to support her, because she is really in danger. Mm-hmm. And it's all come about by some sort of machinery between various organisations. The Grampian police, who failed to investigate her original abusers in 2000.
Yeah.
The Grampian authorities, the people who've been pursuing her in Scotland, are now coming down to England since 2005. She came down to Shropshire with her mother. Mm-hmm. Really, literally, to take refuge here because she thought she'd be safer. Well, they thought they'd be safer. Yeah. And they went first to one women's refuge and then to another women's refuge, and they finally ended up in this sweet little house in a nice, peaceful little village outside Shrewsbury. Yeah. And they really thought they'd come home. Okay. This is a lovely spot and felt safe, and they had a little garden and friendly neighbours. Mm-hmm. And then what happens? The house gets smashed up in June 2010. That's right. By the local authority and the local police. And before that, there had been threats. In fact, there was a car that came down from Scotland, presumably, with Scottish police in it, who threatened Hollie when she was filling up the car. And they trailed Anne and Hollie's car to the petrol station. And when they stopped to fill up, and when Anne went in to pay, this policewoman came and shouted at Hollie, "We're going to get you. Well, don't think you're getting away. We're going to get you. We'll do away with you," or whatever she said, through the window to Hollie. And Hollie was absolutely terrified. And when Anne came back, she was in floods of tears. Of course. So this persecution has been going on, but at least they felt in this little house in this English village a little bit safe at last, but then it was smashed up. So the trauma has started all over again. Yeah. Hollie didn't want to go back there, and the house is still in tatters, really. All the locks are smashed. They can't really live there. Shropshire Council should be putting it right, because it's now a year and a half since that damage was done. Mm-hmm. It's still uninhabitable. Mm-hmm. There's still nowhere for these poor ladies to live. Right. Well, they're hiding. Of course. People supporting them, but they're very vulnerable. Of course. Now these horrible court proceedings. Yeah, that's what we want to talk about. Straight after the house was smashed up, these court proceedings began, literally, the next month. They had to go to the High Court in July 2010, and it was actually the family court. Yeah, which is closed court, isn't it? It's closed. It's a closed court. Yeah. Secret. Nobody can go in, just the parties and whoever's supporting them, representing them. Mm-hmm. And there's no oversight of what goes on in those places. In fact, there was Brian Gerrish actually did go in and actually said this is inequality of arms. I would like to. He actually pushed past the clerk and got in as a McKenzie friend. Okay. That Anne and Hollie were not being fully defended, represented, so he actually got in. So
yeah.
There was somebody to sort of see what went on.
Okay.
But it started then, and what they were subjected to was a report by one of these experts, or these psychiatrists or psychologists, who are brought to the family court to write a report to say that there is a concern about this child. Hollie's not even a child, and she's in the family court. Excuse me.
Yeah.
There's a concern about this child, and da 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 da.
Had this psychiatrist actually met Hollie?
No.
No. Okay.
She produced this report, having never met Hollie. Actually, she'd been through the files, and oddly enough, from Shropshire Council's point of view, it was actually quite supportive of Hollie, if anything.
Okay.
She said that if Hollie was taken away from her mother, this would actually put her in danger. So she issued a warning straight away. She also said, from what she had seen in the files, Hollie rather enjoyed the campaign, because the issue was that Hollie was being distressed by the campaign, exploited, coerced, all these legal words they use.
Yeah.
When in fact, Hollie herself, if she was ever asked, if her voice was ever heard, she would say she loves the campaign. And now I go back to when I first met Anne in early 2010. Anne said that she painted a picture of a poor girl who was terribly distressed when she first started to tell her mum, and it all started to come out. It was like a dam bursting. Up till then, she'd been a brave, brave, brave little girl. She was the bravest girl you could imagine, because for 14 years, she had kept completely quiet about the traumas and the terrors and the pain she was suffering from all these horrible adults, including her own dad, in order to protect her mum and her dogs. Because her father, knowing exactly where Hollie's soft point was, said, if you breathe a word of this, I'll kill you. I'll kill you, I'll kill your mum, I'll kill your dogs. And Hollie didn't mind so much for herself, but her mum and her dogs were the centre of her life. And she knew that her father would carry out the threat because her uncle, who'd stumbled upon him raping her in 1997, was killed shortly after. And we are sure he was murdered. The verdict was suicide, but that case needs looking into. That's another issue in this whole story, the brutal death of Hollie's uncle. So Hollie had every reason to believe her father. So she lived for 14 years in terror, not speaking out and putting up with it for the sake of her mum. I think I just find that extraordinary. But Hollie is extraordinary. She's so determined. She's so completely strong-willed and focused on what I suppose at some level of her mind she must feel is her duty and her job in her life.
Yeah. So let's move forward. I mean, we've obviously had Robert Green's incarceration up there in Aberdeen, and then bizarrely he's put straight away, the focus is put on Robert.
Yes.
No word anywhere about what was going on Friday, the week running up to the case. No. Brian Garish was trying to get it out there, so James, as you know, James and I made that little what if video.
Oh yes, that was so helpful.
Exactly.
I attribute that huge crowd at the High Court, the Royal Courts of Justice. I attribute that to your video.
It's more James to thank on that one, but. So Robert's inside, put out the way. They then
again, you see, I'm focusing on Hollie today because really Hollie is the one that we all need to be thinking about, because she's the one that the authorities are not considering.
That's right.
Can you imagine the effect on her of Robert being imprisoned?
Of course. Well, then after he's put in incarceration, there's all this big campaign to get him out, and in the meantime, unbeknown to many people, Anne's suddenly been told to turn up at court. Yeah. So if you want to give us an update on what was that court hearing on Friday? What did everyone turn up there for?
Right. Well, I told you about the first hearing in the family court in 2010, July.
Yeah.
That was sort of reinforced last summer, in July last summer, by the same family court, then upping the stakes, if you like, against Hollie by imposing on her this new rule book called Court of Protection Rules. The Court of Protection is not actually a building; it's a sort of set of rules or guidelines by which a vulnerable adult will be assessed and orders made according to what she's deemed to need, or he. So it's a new rule book relating to vulnerable adults on the presumption that Hollie is a vulnerable adult. Now, vulnerable adult she obviously is a vulnerable adult because she's got a disability, but the presumption in that vulnerable adult terminology is that she doesn't have this thing called capacity to litigate or to make decisions for her life. And this is where she's already been branded as almost, unable to think for herself or act for herself. And that's why the official solicitor, who is the solicitor, if you like, of last resort in the family court, in the Court of Protection, was appointed to represent her. So she doesn't even have her own solicitor to speak up for her.
Right.
She needs a solicitor who would genuinely put her case across on her wishes.
Yeah.
She's perfectly able to decide what she wants, and she said so privately and to all of us many times.
Okay.
And that hasn't been heard in the court. So this is the situation that Hollie and Anne were appealing when they went to the appeal court on Friday.
Yeah.
They didn't have much time to prepare the appeal because they only got legal aid about 10 days before, and so their legal team had to sort of bone up on the whole thing just a few days. This is the way it tends to happen, accidentally or by design. So, in fact, her counsel did quite a good job in the court because he put across a whole lot of points that needed to be made. Mm-hmm. That she was able to think for herself, and that there was no evidence of incapacity, and that it looked as if the court was taking a paternalistic attitude. That means sort of acting rather like a parent, in relation to a child, which, he objected to that, and a whole string of points. But the appeal court judges, the three justices, they didn't take any time at all to come back with their verdict, having heard Hollie's counsel.
It was about 5 minutes tops, because I was in there.
Came back, and it was almost sort of, we've made up our minds, so don't confuse us with the facts, sort of thing. And, they said, what they said was it needed to go back to the other court because it hadn't been followed through properly. There hadn't been enough evidence put to the other court, which is in fact true.
Yeah.
Because, Hollie needs to put her own point, and she also needs to be assessed by an independent person, which hasn't yet happened. So that, in fact, is true. But that the expert that's been appointed by the official solicitor now, who's in control of the situation in the other court, is not an expert either on Down syndrome or on post-traumatic stress disorder or on sexual abuse. Any of these things. He's an expert. He's a psychiatrist, and he's expert on deafness. That's all, right? So they're not happy with this expert that's been brought in. Mm-hmm. And Hollie, I think, as usual, will probably not be able to get past him to express what she wants to say.
No.
So this is the situation. There is a way through, and they will find a way of sort of getting through this. But in the meantime, of course, it's a very, very troubling and worrying time for them both.
Yeah.
And this is why I think we need to carry on objecting, really, to what's happened.
Yeah.
That somebody who's vulnerable, perhaps, but who's still intelligent and can say what she wants as an adult, has had her human and legal rights literally stripped from her by order of a secret court and by officials who have not assessed her properly and have produced no evidence at all that she doesn't have this golden thing called capacity. So we have to keep on objecting about that the whole time, and supporting her and making this more and more public.
Yeah, what I noticed is that obviously there was the reset. We went in just before 12. Mm-hmm. Excuse me, and we were then thrown out. Well, I think it was just before 1, wasn't it? When then we were told we had to leave for lunch.
Yes.
When we did come back in after lunch, it seemed the room was a lot more hotter. The temperature had been turned up in there.
Yes, all sorts of tricks to make life uncomfortable.
It was very, very uncomfortable in there. It set my cough off because it was so dry. I had to leave. And then as we walked out, security guards had suddenly appeared. Now, I know Brian Garish went up and asked, what are you doing here? And the gentleman who was up there he was told before, you know, whilst the court was in session, to come up ready. So that was another little clue that the decision had already been made, let alone the going out for only 5 minutes, but to have them already waiting in the foyer as everybody left, as if they were going to expect some sort of trouble, which there wasn't, because everyone was peaceful.
Well, there was an element of trouble that was wheeled in, come down 700 miles from Aberdeen.
That's right, yes, I was waiting for you to mention
proceedings.
Yeah.
And why was this woman, who said up in the court in Stonehaven that she was traumatised and her life had been ruined by what had happened, and she could hardly go in the street anymore, and her staff in her hairdressing business had left, and a whole catalogue of woes.
Yeah.
How does she turn up as cool as a cucumber and bold as brass in a London court in front of all Hollie's supporters? Right? And she's got some nerve, hasn't she?
She has, yes. But I mean, there wasn't any need for the heavy-handed security. I mean, I know there were a few words jeered at the lady in question. And
well, maybe they'd been told to come and protect her.
Possibly, yeah. Well, protect. That's the other thing. I mean, still to this day, I don't believe any of the alleged abusers have actually been questioned by the police.
No, because this is confirmed in the trial at Stonehaven in January. All of them, taking the witness stand, were asked, and when these allegations were first made, did the police question you? And they all said no. There was no investigation in 2000. And the reason for that was that the lady who came down to the court on Friday's late husband was one of the abusers named by Hollie, and was the senior forensics officer for Grampian Police at the time. And he was also in the forensics department when her uncle Greig was I think murdered.
Yeah.
So, you know, he can't speak for himself from the grave. So his wife, funnily enough, there's been some surreal moments all through that day on Friday.
Yeah.
So she found it a bit hot in the courtroom, as you said, for other reasons than that the heating was too high, or too many people in the court. So she went down to the Great Hall and was sort of skulking around in the Great Hall downstairs. You can sit on some stone benches there. And various people were going in and out, and one or two people talked to her, because, you know, they had been told by that time who she was. And, so people were sort of curious and also quite angry. One or two Scottish ladies gave her a bit of verbal, as only Scottish ladies can do. I must say, when I listen to these Scottish ladies sounding off, it's almost poetic. I can't do it. Anyway, they gave her a piece of her mind. But one lady, a sympathetic English supporter, stopped to talk to her and said, if you are innocent, why aren't you supporting, Hollie's campaign to get the people who abused her investigated?
Yeah.
You know, if you've been wrongly accused, you should at least be pressing for an investigation into the people who did abuse her, because certainly she was abused, because there's physical evidence.
Yeah.
And lots of circumstantial evidence going back many years, including doctors' reports on her as a child. So why? And so she said, it's really all to do. It's my husband's business, not mine. And so this lady said, "Why are you here?" And she said, "Well, I'm concerned. I'm concerned because we've all been accused." And so this English supporter said, "Well, okay. Then in that case, please talk to us about it." And in fact, they exchanged phone numbers, and said she would. But anyway, the point was that already she said it's nothing to do with her; it's her husband who did all that. So she's already condemned her husband in the grave.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But exonerating herself. Oh, nothing to do with me. That's my husband's business.
So what's next then? Obviously, with family court. So what's the process now? They left the court Friday. Obviously, they're somewhere safe and sound, and I know they're well and they're staying positive. So what are the next steps regarding Shropshire Council, family courts? What happens now? They
will, I think, sooner rather than later, because there's been all this delay. Although the judge did say that the main justice, Justice Thorpe, did say that as she's already 30, there's not an incredible hurry to resolve it. But I think the feeling is that they would like to resolve this pretty quickly now. So we'll probably all be back at the Royal Courts of Justice in possibly even 2 or 3 within the month. 2 or 3 weeks' time, maybe. And what will have to happen then is that, as has been directed from the bench in the appeal court, that all the things that should have happened, that Justice Thorpe deemed hadn't happened and should have happened, will now have to happen, like the production of a countermanding expert report on Hollie. She's already the only document in the court to support the action of Shropshire Council in trying to place a care order on her, whatever that is at the adult level, is one report which was produced by the head of disability of Shropshire Council. In other words, it's sort of biased to that side. So now what has to happen is for Anne and Hollie to produce their expert report, and hopefully to overcome in whatever way they can this appointment of the official solicitor by putting forward their own solicitor. And
right.
I don't know how they're going to do that at this stage because, these official wheels.
So what's the time frame we're looking at? When?
Well, I mean, as I said, I think it could come back to the court, to the other court of protection, within this month.
Right, okay.
Next month. Because obviously they're minded now to wrap this up.
Yeah.
And at the back of it, of course, is always the underlying motivation, which may be from, whatever channels it comes in, to stop Hollie talking and to shut down the campaign.
Right.
Perhaps it's reading too much into it, because in fact I've learned only in the last day or two that the original contact with Shropshire Council came from a somewhat curious side issue, a side point, because one would have thought it would have been Grampian Police who would have got in touch with Shropshire Council. But apparently it was said that they were concerned about this young DS woman who was involved in this very public campaign, which is probably not good for her, and therefore the council, the authorities, should intervene to investigate this and possibly take appropriate measures. Needs, I think, questioning in this. If it ever gets to a more, shall we say, public inquiry level, or possibly even criminal prosecution level, because if Hollie has been abused and there is proof, eventually, after all these family court proceedings are finished, and hopefully she'll be out of those, she still wants to pursue the people who abused her.
Mm.
That's the drive of her life. Don't think that this is all she's being coerced into this. She's the head of her own campaign. She tells her mother she wants to get these people. She wants to stop them. She wants to fight. She said so publicly. She was on TV a couple of years ago, and she said she was asked by the presenter, "What do you want?" And she said, "I want to fight these people." That's what she says every time.
And how are they? Are they in good form and good spirits? How are they feeling?
I haven't seen them since they disappeared into the setting sun on Friday evening, but I have spoken to them, and yes, they feel that, first of all, they're extremely heartened by all the people who came to support them. It can never be underestimated how, if somebody's in a vulnerable situation, how support at the court is so crucial. Just to go in and listen to somebody's hearing, to sit in the public benches, to be there to, pat them on the back afterwards. It makes I can't tell people enough how we must go into those courts and support people who are possibly, going to be subjected to an injustice.
Yeah.
And when nobody's watching what's going on, that's when the injustices happen.
Mm.
Right? And of course, the family courts is absolutely the prime arena for injustices of that kind, because there's the secret.
Of course, that's right.
That's where children are taken away, just on the nod of a social worker and rubber stamped by a judge.
And that's something Brian Garish is working so hard to try and change.
Yes. Well, lots of people working now, because
of course,
I think
absolutely, it's getting bigger.
A major issue.
Yeah.
That these family courts and these social work departments in local authorities are out of control. Mm. I was just going through a list just this morning of children who've died in care, and it's horrendous how many children have died in care in the last few years.
And the amount that go missing as well.
They go missing.
Yeah, and we're going to have Bill Maloney on just towards the last section, and I know he had he really rallied the troops up outside the court.
Oh, he was great that day.
Wasn't he?
He was at his best, you know, really pat on the back to Bill.
Yeah, and there seemed to be so many different people from so many different walks of life out there as well.
Yes.
You know, it was a really good mixture of people, and everyone there for the one cause.
Yes. Well, this is what gives us hope, you see, because the atmosphere there was electric, as though suddenly, you know, something's starting to happen.
Yeah.
And I think from the videos that people could see from what happened and the way Brian spoke and Bill spoke and the crowd and the chanting, shouting, crossing the road with banners and things, the public will realise, you know, something is going on here. You know, there is more to this, and we need to look at it. And they will be encouraged to perhaps join it, because it's a very positive feeling on Friday.
It was.
You know, we're not going to let this happen. We're going to stand up for this very special young person that we all love, and all the children who might be subjected to these family proceedings as well, because that's what Hollie cares about. She cares about all the other children. She doesn't want the other children to be abused.
Yeah.
Right? So the two things, she wants to get her abusers dealt with, and she wants to protect the other children.
Yeah.
So this gets across to people, and it becomes sort of infectious thing. You know, why haven't we thought about this before? This is all about protecting the best human beings, the sweet little children, from danger and from harm and from exploitation and from cruelty. Isn't it?
It is, absolutely.
And it's so basic.
Yeah.
You know, suddenly the penny drops.
Yeah.
Put the children first.
Absolutely.
And if we do, maybe we'll have a happier society all round.
Yeah.
You know, that maybe some sort of pennies may be dropping about that all over the place.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I hope anyway, because I think it's absolutely fundamental that we protect the youngest, the most vulnerable members of society as a priority. And if we do that, you know, as a society, as a body of human beings living in any locality, I think we can't go wrong for the rest of some of the things that we might be worried about, because it orientates you in the right way for the whole of your life. You know, as a parent, your children come first, don't they?
Of course, absolutely,
and
number one.
if you're looking out for your children, you're doing the most natural, exactly what nature ordered you to do. Every adult who has children, and even if they don't have children themselves, but they're a member of a family with children, you know, aunties and uncles,
yeah,
they look out for their children.
They do.
Don't they?
Yeah, they do.
So why not, as a country, as a society, as a world, as an international community, should we not make looking out for children a priority above all other things?
Definitely.
That people are concerned about.
I totally agree.
And the children are the future.
Yeah.
And if we damage a whole generation, which, you know, the problem is with bad trends, I won't say evil trends, but bad trends, if they're allowed to go unchecked, they just multiply, they get reinforced. And, you know, before you know, you've got a horrendous situation with major child trafficking going on. And I'm afraid to say there's evidence that we've already got to that stage.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, children being traded like commodities, like you know, commercial items by councils, you know, sold to people who want children, and sometimes even flown out of the country to God knows where.
Yeah.
There's evidence of all of this going on. Well, it's already got to, because of the secrecy, because of not being able to question what's going on behind closed doors in the council meetings of the children's services up and down the land, and not being able to go into the family courts. This is escalating. The numbers of children being taken into care is going up, and I have to say, endorsed by the government.
Yes.
You know, Cameron says he wants more children adopted, and by implication, you know, the first stage is them being taken into care, right?
Yeah.
And the councils actually have targets.
Yes,
They have targets.
I know it's
getting children into care.
Well, they'd go around the country doing these big fairs. How great it is.
And you're better off.
Fostering.
Off with a nice foster care.
Yeah,
or
that's
a nice
right.
adopted family than with your own rather dysfunctional parents.
And then you have the BBC promoting from their kids' TV programmes, promoting what great fun it is in a children's home.
Oh yeah.
That goes out every day and is beamed round to every child just the second they get in from school.
Yes.
I mean, there's something seriously wrong here. Seriously wrong.
Well, to me, it's a departure from nature that can only lead one way.
Yeah.
To an increasingly, you know, perverted perverted from nature and possibly psychopathic community of human beings. We must stop it. We must get back to the natural order.
So where do we start, Belinda? Where do we start?
We start by putting all our enthusiasm and weight behind Hollie's campaign. Because Hollie's campaign at the moment is the flagship campaign in the anti-child abuse movement, if you like, because it's the one that's got the most publicity. There's so many dimensions to it. The cover-up in Scotland, the inaction of the police, the dereliction of their duties of the police, corruption in the courts, perhaps as well. In other words, trying to brand somebody as having no capacity and pump that through before the case is properly looked at or before there's any evidence produced, and never with listening to what the person themselves is saying. There's an uninvestigated murder. There's a council that smashed up the home in a vicious way of two vulnerable people.
And then we have Robert Green.
Robert Green locked up for trying to pursue the abusers of this young woman rather than, staying quiet. He actually got out there and did something. And her abusers are still at large, and he's locked up.
That's right.
So this is we're in an Alice in Wonderland situation here, aren't we?
Yeah, I played a brief. I interviewed Robert's daughter outside the court. She gave a little bit of an update that he's in good spirits and working the library. Yeah. Have you spoken to him at all, Belinda?
Oh, I speak to him every other day. Yeah.
Okay, and how is it?
Because I'm sort of his voice outside the prison now.
Yeah.
The things to be done and things that need to be said to people and reports to be made. We've got our own blog, and so it's necessary for us to be in communication. So he only has 1 minute, 20 seconds. We cram a lot into that.
Yeah.
And of course I told him about Friday, and he was absolutely thrilled by that. And he said, "Oh, that's so wonderful, because this is just what they need at the moment. They need all the support they can get. Don't worry about me." This is what he always says. "Don't worry about me, I'm fine." But really support them.
And is there, is he going for an appeal to try and get out?
Yes, he is. Without a huge amount of hope, to be honest, because, the sheriff who sentenced him is a pretty powerful sheriff.
Yeah.
He's the sheriff principal.
We'd be careful with names and everything
as
well.
I didn't say any. I didn't say any.
Great.
I just said the sheriff.
Yeah.
All these people are nameless. Oh, I could talk about the expert who assessed Hollie in the court, because that's all on the record in the public proceedings the other day. So we can talk about that.
Okay. So on Robert,
the next step would be the High Court in Edinburgh. But after that, it would be the Supreme Court in London, and I think that's probably where it needs to be anyway.
And would that be open, would it?
I don't know. I think the Supreme Court, the High Court in Edinburgh would be open, yes, and the Supreme Court too, yes.
Right,
the Supreme Court hasn't been going very long, so I don't know really what happens there. But
and then we've got this proposed trip to Edinburgh that's being promoted for April.
You mean Aberdeen?
Aberdeen,
yes.
Aberdeen,
yes.
I think 14th and 15th of April.
Yes, well, first it was the 7th and 8th, which was Easter weekend, so switched to the 14th, 15th of April. I wasn't sure at first whether it was a good idea because of the possible sensitivities surrounding, because the Aberdeen people will have been told that a whole lot of nice, ordinary, decent, God-fearing local people have been accused of being paedophiles. There's been a trial, and their accuser has been sent down. Therefore, they are innocent. And I thought it might be inflammatory for us to come up in buses and start dredging the whole thing up all over again. But now, I have to say I've sort of moved over to thinking it is a good idea because, number one, Robert is keen. And I think we should do whatever Robert wants at this stage. And if people are willing to make the effort and risk the possibility that the buses may not even be allowed into Aberdeen, they may be blocked at the outskirts. You see what I mean? That's what I said.
Yeah.
We'll go up there and we won't be able to reach the end point. Anyway, we'll have to discuss that more. But the other thing which has swayed me is, well, two things have swayed me. One is that the next supporter of Justice for Hollie, who was leafleting the other day in central Aberdeen, he was arrested and put in the cell.
That's right, yeah.
Right? And I should think this is a lesson to all of them that, don't the campaign is being blocked up there, so that's made me cross. The third thing that made me cross is that this woman has come 700 miles from Aberdeen down to London to frighten Hollie in the court. That was her. I'm sure that was her mission, was to come and give Hollie the heebie-jeebies. When poor Hollie saw her, she was very frightened.
Well, Hollie had so much support there, you know, and we can't let that dampen one person's whatever's going on there. But I mean, we have to, of course.
What I'm saying, it was a vicious thing to do, really.
Of course. Belinda, I'm out of time. Yep. Thank you so much for sparing your time.
It's a wonderful opportunity for me.
And we'll also, well, I'd like to get you on again, just coming up towards April, if that's all right. And we can, we can discuss more, and then any updates, obviously, if we hear about what's happening in the family courts, we can always touch base with you.
Well, I think I can guarantee that this is going to go on moving very fast now, so watch this space, everybody.
Well, I'm just going to get Bill Maloney, I'm going to play a song and then get Bill Maloney on. But once again, thank you for all the hard work as well you do, because it's not just Anne and Hollie you're out there campaigning for. I know you're out there all the time for any cause.
Well, we've got this worldwide protest for the children tomorrow, so
and where is that?
Outside Parliament, practically the whole, either inside Parliament or outside Parliament, the whole day tomorrow. Well, for the children.
Well, good luck with that, Belinda, and we'll speak to you again soon.
Thank you very much, Liz.
Thanks, Belinda. Bye-bye. I'm going to cut that off a bit early because I'm running out of time. I'm going to bring Bill on now. Bill Maloney's on. He was down at street level rallying all the troops round. Morning, Bill.
Hello, Lou. Is it morning or afternoon?
It's still morning. You've got 10 minutes.
What day is it?
Late night.
Yeah, right, we've got 10 minutes.
You got 10 minutes, right. Ground level, we've just been speaking to Belinda McKenzie, who told us how it all went inside and an update on the course. How was it down on the street? You were out there with all the troops.
Yeah, vibrant and exciting and a privilege, actually. If I can just say that we pulled all stops out for this one at Primesh Films, and as I'm talking to you, the film Hollie Greig Echoes Through the Royal Courts is uploading. So it's been uploading since the early hours of this morning, and it's saying we've got about 4 hours to go. So everyone can go onto YouTube, and I'll repeat the title: Hollie Greig Echoes Through the Royal Courts. It's think Hollie is a miracle, and Hollie will attract miracles and does attract miracles, because I think she's a very, very special girl. Because Hollie isn't just here for Hollie. Hollie is here for all the other kids with either learning disabilities or Down syndrome or disabilities that are being abused. And I'm afraid to say that the disabled children are the worst abused, and that is outrageous. So, we've done a 30-hour edit straight. And, so I haven't had a lot of sleep, and I think I woke up with a cold as well.
Oh, no.
Well, that's all right, Lou. That's what happens when you fight the devil, you know what I mean? He's going to punch you back and maybe give you a cold and a few other things.
So,
on the street level, it was, I was outraged, actually, because there were 3 Sky teams there. Everything is on film.
Yep.
There were 3 Sky teams there, and they were waiting for Ryan Giggs to come out.
Yep.
And I would like to tell people, whether you're Manchester United supporters or not, you've got to forget that. Ryan Giggs is one of the people that is trying to quieten the media. And the Ryan Giggs story and many other stories is out because of Citizens Media. Because, Primash Films, we are citizens, part of Citizens Media. And the way we report, we're not restricted. We don't sanitise it. We give you as it is. So the object of this 42-minute documentary that's on its way up was to put your listeners and many other people around the world onto the street with us.
Yeah.
That's what we wanted to do, and that is what I believe we've done. This film will shock you. It will make you laugh. It will make you cry. But it will, when Hollie comes out at the end, it's just heartbreaking. Because when I, when I watch Hollie, Hollie's a lovely, lovely looking girl, lovely.
She's gorgeous, isn't she?
Endearing child, and I still say child, and I don't mean to denigrate her on that. But she is a woman and a child. She's very special, and she's highlighting this case. And when you look at her, because it's the first time I actually saw Hollie. I've done many interviews with Robert, and when I first saw her, I looked at her and thought she's lovely. But then I started, as I was standing there, applauding her and Anne, her mum. I began to go into the horrors that had happened to her as I stood on that pavement that day. And that is just absolutely horrendous. And that's what we've shown in this film. And it is a classic Primash Films piece. I'm very, very proud of it, Lou.
Great.
And we did it. I don't even think we got one expletive in it either. So,
wow, that's amazing.
Set the fans.
So tell me, how did it? What was the? How did you feel? Was everyone? There was a good feeling down there, wasn't there? It was everyone was positive.
There was a buzz, but we spoke to a couple of very high-profile barristers who didn't know about the Hollie Greig case, but they do now. We spoke to a lawyer called Stephen Field, who said he's going to work for Robert pro bono and try and get him out of prison. We very quickly spoke to a police officer. And I'll tell you something, Lou, what I thought was strange, you was there. I mean, we were causing an obstruction. We was very vocal.
Very.
We slowed the traffic down because I think for about an hour and a half we just kept going, walking across.
It was practically a standstill, Bill. When I came out, I just couldn't believe.
We was walking across the zebra crossing.
That's it.
With placards, we were doing that for 2 hours, and the police. Not one police officer walked past there. A couple of police vans walked past, and 2 police officers on horses. And one of the police officers on a horse took a card, and we were running out in the street, and but a couple of them refused as they drove past. So I can't understand why there were no police there, because it's such a delicate case. And with the 3 Sky teams there, and they could not pick up their cameras and come and report it, so their hands are tied. So there is no freedom of the press there. So let's forget about that. And I'm ashamed to say that I'm probably part of the same union because I hold a broadcasting press card as these these men and women who would not pick up their cameras and come over and see what this is all going on, what is going on. So that's it, you know, and I don't know, look, you was there. What do you think?
Oh, well, I thought it was brilliant. I mean, when I came out the court and saw you with troops of people behind you, you know, it was overwhelming, the amount of support and the amount of people that were there for the one person. And as you say, there weren't police stopping you. You know, not many people walking past didn't know about the Hollie Greig case. Well, they certainly do now.
Yeah. Well, you know, we got some. It's sort of like when you get on the show, without blowing trumpets here, but you know, it's media that is going to get these cases dealt with, exposed, whatever. When you got people like Brian Garish, you got Belinda, and then you got, you know, sort of from the gutter, me. We are all so different, and many other campaigners. You know, people do understand on all different levels and different classes.
Yeah.
You know, Belinda really appeals to the middle classes. Then you got like Raggy Bill, who appeals to the lower classes. I speak their language, you know. And then you got Brian Garish, who is, you know, he's like a computer talking. Actually,
he's just wonderful, man. He's just a very good man, and well, everybody, you know.
There are many more. You know, I probably missed out so many campaigners, their names, you know, that are fighting for good. And you know, as I say, the children are the future, and they are the future keepers of the planet. And if we're abusing them, then this world's just going to go round and round and round.
Yeah, you're just echoing what Belinda said, Bill. I mean, you're quite right. What everybody's been saying, the children are the future, and it's them we need to be protecting.
Well, they're the future keepers of the planet. At the moment, we're the keepers of the planet, and we haven't done very well. And we all take responsibility for that, even if you're like, you know, a recognised campaigner. You still do. No one's perfect. We all make mistakes. But we need this, you know, we need to be fair now, especially with the children. And, you know, with the judge going out, you know, it was quite, it was about going on for about 2 hours. And then the judge went out. I wasn't in there, but what I've been told, and then they came back.
Yeah, I was in there. But the heat in that...
The judges came back within 4 to 5 minutes.
4 to 5 minutes, yeah. And security guards waiting outside, or you know, so...
They came back after 4 to 5 minutes and then deliberated for 40 minutes. So I should imagine that was already set up. They've gone to the Royal Courts of Justice, and let's remember the Royal Courts of Justice. And I can't. I tell you what, I've got to say, you know, the Queen is a mother, a grandmother. The Royal Courts. I can't understand why she can't get involved. Now, Harry's allowed to talk to the press. Everyone's allowed to talk to the press except the Queen. And we only hear the Queen speak with us when she's reading from a speech. And I think it's about time that someone sat down and spoke to the Queen and asked her about all the horrors, you know, people sleeping on the streets outside Buckingham Palace and all over the place, you know what I mean? And it's all very well saying she's a figurehead. Well, she wouldn't be a multi-billionaire if she was just a figurehead, you know what I mean? Because then we're just saying that she's just an advertising board, and now we've got William and Harry. And, you know, Harry's flying Apache helicopters, so, etc. And Princess Diana... well, you know, loved the kids.
Yeah.
I just wanted them to get involved. And you know, we made a film called Adam Rickwood and the Madams of the Heroes quite a while ago, a wonderful film. And in that we're saying, Your Majesty, get involved.
Yeah. Please. Bill, listen, I'm out of time. Quick, what's the video called? What time do you think it's going to be up on the YouTube channel?
It should be up within the next 4 hours, and it's called Hollie Greig Echoes Through the Royal Courts.
And just really quickly, how's the Mayor campaign coming along?
Well, the Mayor campaign is... the thing with the Mayor campaign is we need money. Now, we've got to give City Hall £10,000. Now, I'm running for Mayor so that I can highlight cases of many campaigners.
Yeah.
Not just about child abuse, about our civil liberties, about the way the country's being run. And I would like... I appeal now, this is the first appeal I've made, really, to on any radio show. If you can help. If you want to get someone in there that's going to stir it up and try and put it right positively and in the correct fashion, then I'm your man. If we don't get that money to do it, then we can't do it. Everything else, we can do it. We can get the votes, whatever. But even if it's only a protest, but it's the journey there. And, you know, if we get the help and we get the money, then, anyway, listen, Google Bill Maloney, London Mayor.
Lovely, Bill. I've got to go because my time's up.
Thank you very much.
I so need longer. All right, Bill. Well, listen, we'll catch up again soon.
I always sign off. God bless all victims and survivors.
Yeah, and love to please pass our love on to Marie and to Lil as well.
Of course I will. Thank you very much, Lou.
Cheers, Bill.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Great Bill Maloney there. Well, again, I'm out of time. I say it every week. It's just not long enough. I'm going to play out with a bit of Muse. I'm back next Monday, at 11 with Peter Reynolds. He's going to be joining me. He's coming into the studio. Hopefully I have James back with me. It's a bit lonely in here without him. So, yeah, to James, thanks for everything you've done. To the Bear, thank you for looking after the kids. And to Brian, Garish, Ian Crane, Bill Maloney, and of course, Anne and Hollie. You know, everyone's behind you, and we all love you and support you. And, yeah, thank you for having me. Have a look. And I pointed her in the direction of the What If video, which I can now say that myself and James made. James has to take all the credit for it. He had about 5 hours sleep in 3 days working to get the Hollie What If video right. I just went and did the audio. So a really huge thanks and so much appreciation for all the work that James does. He also it was his birthday Friday, and he sort of gave up his birthday to come up and take pictures, do a bit of filming, did the interview that I'm going to play literally right now while I get Belinda on the phone. And yeah, to James, you know, couldn't do all this without you. He makes the videos. Him and David from Black Swan make the videos that go up on YouTube for me. So without them, I don't know where I'd be. So I'm going to play this interview now with Catherine. Just a little bit of an update on her dad, and I know he wanted to say thanks. So I'm going to get this lined up now, and I'll get Belinda on the screen. She's been up here today supporting Anne and Hollie in the case that we're going to talk a bit later about. How's he doing, Catherine?
My dad's doing fine at the moment. He seems to be holding up. His spirits are high. He seems to be getting on well in the prison despite his circumstances. Nobody in the prison can really understand why he's there. So they seem to be quite friendly towards him. So we're pleased about that. And he seems to be working in the prison library.
Fantastic.
And he's helping some of the prisoners they're struggling to learn, struggling to read and write, to read and write with their reading and writing ability. So, yeah.
And has he got all the letters? Is it, they all flying in daily?
He's had so many letters, and he always tells me, he speaks to me every day on the phone.
It's Lou Collins, it's the 5th of March, it's just past 11 o'clock. Well, what a week, what a weekend. I don't know if you remember last week, and the last few weeks, we've been discussing a serious case of Hollie Greig. Myself, James, who isn't here today, he's off to the hospital with his mum, so hi James, Jenny, I hope you're well and good luck today. Myself, James, Brian Garish and the rest of the UK column went up to London to support Anne and Hollie, and we've also got an interview which I'm going to play very shortly with Robert Green's daughter. Robert Green was arrested in 2010 for handing out leaflets, or on his way to hand out some leaflets up in Aberdeen, and his trial was a couple of weeks ago. He was put in prison for 1 year for attempting to hand out some leaflets, and that was apparently disrupting the peace, and then for breaking bail conditions. Previous shows you'll have heard all about it. So we went to the court. There was 2 carloads, great support, lots of people waiting outside. We all ferried into the court just before 12 o'clock for about 4 minutes, where we were told to have a break for lunch. Belinda McKenzie, who's the main campaigner towards Hollie and holliedemandsjustice.org website, she's going to be on the phone giving us really a proper update, because it went all over my head, some of what they were talking about in there.
And he always tells me to thank everybody for their support.
That's great.
It's really helping him in there. And he always tells me, please say thank you to everybody whenever you get the opportunity to say thank you to everybody for all their help and support.
Oh, that's great, Catherine. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you.
That's just a brief thank you to everyone. As you say, he's working in the library. He's he's overwhelmed with the amount of support that's out there for him. I'm going to bring Belinda in right now. Morning, Belinda.
Morning. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to perhaps flesh out a bit more what I said rather briefly outside the court on Friday.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Because really this is, a lot more needs to be said about this. It's really quite complex, and it is a very scary situation for Hollie, actually, and I really would like the public to know that they do need to keep speaking out to support her, because she is really in danger. Mm-hmm. And it's all come about by some sort of machinery between various organisations. The Grampian police, who failed to investigate her original abusers in 2000.
Yeah.
The Grampian authorities, the people who've been pursuing her in Scotland, are now coming down to England since 2005. She came down to Shropshire with her mother, really, literally, to take refuge here because she thought she'd be safer. Well, they thought they'd be safer.
Yeah.
And they went first to one women's refuge and then to another women's refuge, and they finally ended up in this sweet little house in a nice, peaceful little village outside Shrewsbury.
Yeah.
And they really thought they'd come home.
Okay.
You know, this is a lovely spot and felt safe, and they had a little garden and friendly neighbours.
Mm-hmm.
And then what happens? The house gets smashed up in June 2010.
That's right.
By the local authority and the local police. And before that, there had been threats. In fact, there was a car that came down from Scotland, presumably, with Scottish police in it, who threatened Hollie when she was filling up the car. And they trailed Anne and Hollie's car to the petrol station. And when they stopped to fill up, and when Anne went in to pay, this policewoman came and shouted at Hollie, "We're going to get you. Well, don't think you're getting away. We're going to get you. We'll do away with you," or whatever she said, through the window to Hollie. And Hollie was absolutely terrified. And when Anne came back, she was in floods of tears.
Of course.
So this persecution has been going on, but at least they felt in this little house in this English village a little bit safe at last, but then it was smashed up. So the trauma has started all over again.
Yeah.
Hollie didn't want to go back there, and the house is still in tatters, really. All the locks are smashed. They can't really live there. Shropshire Council should be putting it right, because it's now a year and a half since that damage was done. It's still uninhabitable. There's still nowhere for these poor ladies to live.
Right.
Well, they're hiding.
Of course.
People supporting them, but they're very vulnerable.
Of
and
course.
now these horrible court proceedings.
Yeah, that's what we want to talk
because
about.
Straight after the house was smashed up, these court proceedings began, literally, the next month. They had to go to the High Court in July 2010, and it was actually the family court.
Yeah, which is closed court, isn't it? It's closed.
It's a closed court.
Yeah.
Secret. Nobody can go in, just the parties and whoever's supporting them, representing them. And there's no oversight of what goes on in those places. In fact, there was Brian Gerrish actually did.
Anne and Hollie, I must say, did seem in great spirits, and even though it wasn't the result everyone was hoping for, they still came out with smiles on their face, and I know how much they appreciated the amount of people that turned up there to support them, as did Robert Greene's daughter, Catherine. So I've got that interview to play now while I get Belinda McKenzie from Hollie Demands Justice onto the phone. And just at the end of the show, Bill Maloney was down there, who has also been a previous guest on the show, Pie and Mash Films. He's also running for London Mayor. He's going to be on just before the end, just to say what the feeling was down on the street, because him and Lily were down there filming, speaking to everybody. Bill organised everyone to be crossing on the zebra crossing outside the court with their banners, stopping people. There was also some mainstream media up there, which apparently were there for Ryan Giggs. I know Bill went over and had a word with them and asked why they won't. And there was a bit of a confrontation. Later on, I strolled over there. And first of all, I played it a bit of a different way, saying, "Oh, that's great. It's really good to see there's mainstream media here in support for this case. It hasn't been mentioned, and good on you." And then they looked rather embarrassed and said that they weren't there for the case. And I said, why? You're human beings. Does this not strike a chord with you? And is this not something that should be reported on? Who are you here to film? And they said Ryan Giggs, the footballer. So it beggars belief, as far as I'm concerned, that the mainstream will turn up in hordes to film and interview a footballer, but there's a little girl who's had some shocking things happen to her. A court case Friday to determine whether it goes back into the hands of the family courts, the closed family courts. And there wasn't a bit of remorse on them. The Sky News reporter, I must say, did say she would go and have